Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak today. My name's Danielle Thys. I'm a performer and a writer and a member of Actors Equity Association living in Oakland. So the ghost ship tragedy was a pretty visceral experience for me. And I wrote a piece that is included at the very end of the report entitled Judgment and the Ghost Ship Tragedy. So I wrote that piece through tears at 3 o'clock in the morning the night after the fire. And like many in my social network, I felt, there but for the grace of God go I. A lot of people I know, myself included, have lived in similar spaces. Maybe not that bad, but I was most upset about the fact that this is, again, a toll that artists pay for living in what is more and more a culturally impoverished country. And I bemoaned the fact that being an artist in the United States is staggeringly more difficult than many other developed countries where artists are supported and celebrated as culture makers and shapers. I cited a number of statistics about arts budgets on numerous developed countries across the globe. I won't go into all of those here, but in brief, South Korea, for instance, with a population of 50 million, invests annually $7 billion a year for arts and culture. France, with 67 million inhabitants, spends closer to 10 billion every year on arts and culture. Even Northern Ireland, with only 2 million people, awards 21 million every year for art, theater, and literature projects. So to be on a par with those economies, California, with our roughly 40 million people, would need to cough up, if we were looking at the South Korean or French model, closer to $6 billion a year. If we were going to hedge more towards the Northern Ireland model, it would be more like 400 million a year. So, the NEA, that's about 150 million.
Now the president wants to get rid of it altogether.
Yeah, and we were grateful that it funded it all this year. And California Arts Commission is set to invest 15 million across the state through several programs. That's a bump up from last year, and again, we're grateful for that. But again, it pales in comparison to the investment made by countries that don't systematically deny artists cultural legitimacy for their indisputable and deeply valuable contribution to society. So thanks to the Otis report, in concert with reports from the California Arts Commission and others, we do have this measurable proof that the arts have a significant positive impact on California's economy. As we've heard today, the creative economy is a massive economic driver for the Golden State, accounting for over 400 billion in total economic output, 12% of our state's gross product. We also know that arts foster skills that are universally valued across multiple disciplines, like team building and listening and empathy skills, leadership, project management skills, and the ability to communicate across cultural, religious, race, class divides, even partisan divides. A significant percentage of artists, especially those in smaller markets, don't necessarily have full-time employment in our chosen field, nor could we take it if it were even available, given the pay and the cost of living in these areas. That doesn't make that work any less valuable to the communities where we live. Every dollar spent on a ticket for a live performance nets the surrounding community between $5 and $7. Yeah. For parking, restaurants, construction materials to build the set, fabric to build the costumes, that sort of thing. But artists only see, of course, a small fraction of that initial dollar. So the high cost of living in those areas where one can actually find work and other artists with whom to collaborate, which is what we need to have, means that our annual incomes routinely are inadequate to meet even our most basic needs, which gives rise to that host of problems, many of which constellated in the the tragic events that happened in Oakland on the night of that fire. We're in the midst of what many in the arts feel is a reformation, a massive shift in how we define culture and how we determine who participates in creating it. Technology has brought about an amazing democratization within our field. So, you know, anyone at this point can be an artist or an actor or an author. And while this is in turns very exciting, it can be for a professional artist like myself a little bit terrifying. But the fact that we have, I know I'm trying to wrap it up. To shift our cultural direction away from the effects of what is basically the fallacy of a market-only orientation that's uninformed by social conscience, we have to reframe our understanding of the artist's role in American society and give appropriate gravity to our understanding of the arts as a mechanism that shapes both our personal and our national character. It's through a more humane, an insightful and empathetic lens. As much as I would like to believe that my head rules my heart, the reality is we are emotional creatures. There's a reason why the advertising industry is $1 billion, or billions and billions of dollar industry. It appeals to our emotions, and that works. The arts directly messages the emotional side, communicating across disciplines, across cultural and partisan divides, because they invite us to play. They invite us to imagine, to empathize with, and listen to one another's stories without suspicion, without fear, without contempt. And they provide a safe space within which to do that. They invite us to abandon our partisan silos. So in summary, I can't think of anything we need more right now than a safe place to understand our fellow Americans with the generosity of spirit the arts engender and inspire. And I know it represents a paradigm shift, but substantially increasing the support for those responsible for making the goods that create those gains should be worth, at the very least, to California, 1/10 of 1% of the creative economy's total economic output, or about 2% of the $16.7 billion in tax.